Hi, everyone. I'm Erik Seidel, the director of middle school, and I want to thank you all for joining us for tonight's talk, The Art of the Game with Erik Seidel and Maria Konnikova. I want to start by saying what an incredible week it's been for the Gateway community, from our alumni conversation on Sunday to yesterday's talk with Noma and Judine. We have heard from so many inspiring panelists, and I am grateful to be part of this. And with that, I am thrilled to share this virtual stage tonight with Erik Seidel and Maria Konnikova. Maria is a New York Times best-selling author. She wrote The Confidence Game and Mastermind, How to Think Like Sherlock Holmes, and is a contributing writer to The New Yorker. Today, she is here to speak with us about her most recent book, The Biggest Bluff, where she shares her journey of becoming a poker player and everything she learned along the way. Joining Maria tonight is Erik Seidel. Erik is a professional poker player, winner of 8 World Series of Poker bracelets, and was inducted into the Poker Hall of Fame in 2010. He also holds the title of World's Greatest Dad, and he says he has a mug to prove it. So Dad and Maria, thank you and welcome to the Gateway Speaker Series.
Thank you so much, Elion. And I would like to say that he also should hold the title of World's Greatest Mentor and Coach alongside Dad. So I'm honored to be here as an honorary member of the Seidel clan for the night.
Well, we're happy to have you, honorary Seidel clan member, and then also a Gateway community member. So Maria, I'd love to start by having you just share a little bit with everybody about how you became interested in learning poker, and then how my dad got in the mix.
Absolutely. So I am not a poker player by birth or upbringing or training or anything like that. And I don't think Erik will ever let me live down the fact that I did not know how many cards were in a deck when I first met him. But I've progressed since then. I know how many cards are in a deck, and I'm very proud of that knowledge. But I came to poker from a very different angle, which is kind of the desire to learn more about the role that chance plays in our lives and how we can learn to tell the difference between what is skill, what we can control, and what is chance, kind of those things that are outside of our control, and how we can learn to kind of make better decisions and maximize the skill elements and learn to deal with the bad luck when it comes our way, because it inevitably will. And bad luck is actually kind of what brought me to poker when I went through a period of my life where just everything was going wrong. And it made me realize that there really is a limit to our skill and to what we can do. And what brought me to poker as a game was a book that I read, which was The Theory of Games and Economic Behavior. I didn't understand it. It's way over my head. The last math class I took was in high school. and I was actually very, very worried at the beginning of this journey that I would not have the math skills to be able to be competitive. But the book was by John von Neumann, and he was a poker player. And I learned that game theory was actually born out of poker. And I thought, if this brilliant guy who was the father of game theory and the father of the computer and did all these cool things, thought that poker was the key to life, which he did. He thought that if you could actually solve poker, you'd have the key to strategic decision maker everywhere. It's like, wow, that's interesting. What is poker? And so how I came to your dad, I was like, this is a really interesting book idea. Why don't I actually learn how to play this game and have someone really great teach me? At this point, someone really great was just kind of an ambiguous thing because I didn't know a single poker player. And see what I can learn and kind of delve into this world and use poker as a metaphor for life, as a way of looking at how we make decisions in everyday life. And so I did what every good journalist does, which is I went on Google and I typed in best poker player in the world, which is great. This is the way that everyone should get into poker. And, a bunch of YouTube videos came up and a bunch of lists came up. And it didn't take me long to actually narrow it down to one single choice, which was Erik Seidel, aka World's Greatest Dad, as you know him. And it's very funny. I feel so ridiculously grateful every day that he actually agreed to this insane project. I don't think at that point he realized just how insane and time consuming it was going to be. I might have undersold it a little bit to get him on board originally, but I didn't have a number two choice. And the reason that he was just number one and I had no idea who was going to come next was he checked every single box, which was longevity, someone who has been in the game and has been winning for a very long time. There's no one else, literally, there's not another poker player who's actually been winning at the highest level since the 80s. He's the only one. And then the other very important thing was he seemed like a nice person. A lot of poker players do not seem like very nice people. So you look at videos on YouTube and you see, and it's all about them and they're aggressive and they just look like jerks. And I have yet to find a single moment when Erik Seidel looked like a jerk. So that's how he came into the picture. And then it was up to him. Then he actually agreed to this crazy proposition from someone he'd never met before. I did come prepared and I did have, a spiel and a sales pitch, but I think that luck had a role to play in this as well.
Yes. Yeah. I love that portion of your book when you're talking about the initial conversation and how you were at one point, it started to feel like it was going in the wrong direction. You'd like get it back on track. And so, Dad, I would love to hear a little bit about how you initially felt when Maria approached you about this, because I know there's one teacher in the family and that's me, but you also clearly had something in you that Maria wanted to learn from. So I would just love if you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, I just was very impressed with her. She's obviously very bright, and she worked for the New Yorker, which, obviously, has the best writers in the world. And it just seemed like this is a really cool project. I think it would be fun to be involved in this. And I don't know. I love the idea from the start, and I thought it was very nice that she asked me.
I'm sorry. That just says everything you need to know about Erik, that he thinks it's nice that I asked him. And for those who have not read The Biggest Bluff, which is absolutely fine, just so you know what exactly I asked him, I basically said I would like to tag along with you for the next year and learn from you and just figure out what this whole world is about and see if you can teach me from not knowing anything to actually being competitive. And it ended up being a lot more than a year. And so it was a big ask. It wasn't like I said, hey, would you give me a poker lesson? It was much more immersive. So that just says everything about Erik, and also I think about what makes great mentors and what makes great poker players or someone who's great at anything. And it's this just absolute humility that I think defines greatness. This knowledge that while other people might think you're great, you're constantly questioning and striving and curious and engaged and say yes to crazy asks from journalists like this.
I thought it was fun. It never seemed like a burden. I thought it was always fun, going over the hands and all the stories from, especially when you went out to Vegas for the first few times and started playing with some of those crazy people.
Yeah, I actually would love to hear a little bit more about this, because I think, Maria, one of the things that really resonated with me and made me think a lot about the work that we do at Gateway and helping kids take risks and put themselves out there when it might seem scary at first. And so I would love to hear you talk a little bit more about kind of what you were thinking going into the live tournament for the first time, or how you approached the game, knowing that failure was potentially right around the corner.
Yeah, it was scary. I mean, I think I'd be lying if I said if it was anything but just stomach churning scary. I still remember, well, first of all, my first live tournament was a charity event, much like the one that Gateway will be hosting right after this talk.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad we got to that part of our script, Maria. Right after this talk, we have the poker tournament.
But it was a live event, and I didn't realize that I was going to be playing because Erik, I don't know if he planned to trick me or if he just ended up tricking me unwittingly, but he had said, oh, you can come to this poker event I'll be playing. And what I assumed by that was you can watch me play. There's this charity event happening in New York City. And so I thought that was a wonderful idea. And when I got there, I got a little table number, and I'd been to other charity events and they weren't poker events. So I assumed that was my dinner table number. And at some point I realized that I was actually playing, and I'd had no chance to be nervous ahead of time. But then it was just the scariest moment in the world. And your sister was playing as well. And it was one of those things where I just said, wait, what? I don't know what I'm doing. And I was a nervous wreck, but I got through it. And that was a charity event. But the first time I played live in Vegas, I actually threw up because I was so nervous. This is not in my book, but I had to go to the bathroom because I was so scared of playing in a live tournament and that I would do something wrong and that I would just somehow screw it all up. And this was just so that we have a little bit of context. I think this was a $35 tournament. So it wasn't for particularly high stakes, but it was scary. And there were definitely moments, especially early on, when I wasn't doing well and the atmosphere wasn't necessarily always great, where I just thought, I'm so glad that I'm a journalist and that I know Erik and that he's already introduced me to all of his friends and that I know what's possible. And so I think that perspective is what kept me going. I tried to channel one of my favorite writers who I quote in the book, actually in a scene where we are at breakfast with Erik, Nora Ephron. And she has a quote that I just always like to channel whenever I'm in a situation that is unpleasant or unnerving or where I'm feeling uncomfortable. And that is, everything is copy. And that's such a great attitude to have because it helps you just get outside of whatever's going on and obtain perspective and kind of see yourself from a third person point of view and say, wow, the worse the story as it's happening, the better the story on the page, the better the story as you're retelling it. And so this knowledge that everything is copy kind of helped me get through the losses and through the parts that weren't necessarily great at the moment. They were great on the page. And I just think that that's a good attitude to have, even if you're not a journalist. It's a great way to get through some rough patches, to say, you know what, at some point I'm going to look back on this and it's going to make great copy. It's going to make a great story over dinner one day.
Excellent perspective. So Dad/Erik, Maria really sees you as a mentor and looks to you as a mentor and wrote a whole book about a lot of it. How important do you think it is to have a mentor? And is there anyone in your life that you can think about or point to who may have inspired you along the way?
Yeah, there have definitely been a few people. I would start with, I had a teacher in high school and I was a real pain in the ass student. I just was I barely got through each grade, and she was always supportive and always believed in me. I mean, I don't think I was unique. I think that was just the way she was with all the students, and she was really a life-changing person for me. And then I was a professional backgammon player before I played poker, and I got very close to Paul McGrill, who really is the greatest backgammon teacher in the world, and one of the greatest players in the world. And he really He was just incredibly generous with his time. I would go over to his place at 2 or 3 in the morning after I played, and would go over matches and stuff. He had this incredible enthusiasm for backgammon, and it just was really fun to be around him. So that was, how I developed my backgammon skills are a good part of it. And then, in poker, I've learned from a lot of people. And what's interesting now is that a lot of people who I would consider people who I'm learning from, and people who are, might be considered mentors now, or way younger than I am, because the game's gotten very technical. And so most of the really best players are in their 30s. And some of them have been very generous with their time and will answer my questions. And it says something really great about the poker environment, that somebody like Jason Kuhn, who's one of the top players in the world, is happy to spend time and talk about these, a lot of the new things that have come into the game. So I would say that's been a constant my whole life. I should also add that in the process of teaching Maria, she got so good that at some point she was teaching me about things that I wasn't that familiar with, and a lot of some of the computer situations and things. So.
Well, I'm not. Don't sell yourself short. You're not that bad with computers. I can. So one of the things I was just thinking about hearing both of you talk is that both of you, I would consider, are lifelong learners. You're people that like to learn, and you like new situations. And Maria, if you could just talk a little bit about what that's like for you, and how you approach all of these new endeavors, and what makes you so interested in continuing to grow.
Absolutely. I mean, I just think that one of the most amazing things about life and being alive is that you can learn something new every day, and that you can meet people who inspire you and who teach you, and who teach you to be curious about something you didn't even know to be curious about. I think one of the goals that I've always had is to walk into rooms where I'm the dumbest person as often as possible, because you challenge yourself, you learn, and you grow that way. And whenever I'm taking on a new project, whenever I'm doing something new, one question I always ask myself is, does this scare me? And if the answer is yes, that means it's probably good. If the answer is no, it actually probably means that it's the wrong thing, because it's in my comfort zone. I already know it. If it doesn't scare me, that means that it's old hat. And so that's kind of my litmus test for, is this going to be something worthwhile? And you know what? That comes with a lot of failure. And that's fine. And that's one of the things that, I think poker has also been great at teaching me, kind of the importance of being able to let go and saying, I failed, that's okay. Let's move on. Let's learn. Let's keep going and see what I can do better. And to me, it's just so wonderful to be able to just stay open-minded and never know what's going to happen in 6 months or a year or 2 years. I had no idea. If you had asked me 10 years ago, Maria, are you ever going to play poker? I would have said no. Why would I play poker? What's poker? But when kind of the right things came to play, I thought, wow, this is fascinating. The more I learned about it, the more interesting it became, the more difficult and challenging it became. And the more it inspired me, because I was learning so much and it was teaching me so much. And so I think that that's a great just example of the fact that no one can see the future. You have no idea what the you of tomorrow is going to be like. And so why not just try to follow your curiosity and do things because they're interesting, and because they might teach you something, and because you're passionate about them, and not because you say, okay, well, this is a good step to get me to this place. Because how do you even know if that's the place you want to go before you try? So to me, that's how I try to live my life. And one of the things that has really inspired me in spending time with Erik is how much curiosity, just boundless curiosity, he has about everything. And I think that's why he's so good at poker still. That's why he's an anomaly, because most people, excuse me, don't have that. They don't have that curious passion for life. It's contagious.
I think, again, one of the things that really resonated with me when I was reading the book and thinking about how it connects so much to the work that we do with kids is this theme of failure, and not always winning, and what you can learn from those opportunities. So, Dad, I know that you've had a lot of success for sure, but there have also been moments where you have had to experience that failure as well. And what kind of advice did you have to give yourself, or how did you talk yourself through those really difficult moments?
I mean, it is a constant, is that we're always faced with failures, and it happens every day. But I just don't. I do consider it a learning opportunity, and I also look at it in the long term. Most of these things I won't even remember. So, I don't. I don't know. I mean, it does seem like we're faced with it a lot constantly, and it just seems like it's a part of life, and you do your best, and and then if you fail, you do your best again, and you just I think you just continue to try and make a little bit of improvement in whatever you're doing.
So Maria, I know that you talked right now a little bit about failure, but this whole project experience for you was certainly a success in a lot of ways, from the book to the tournaments you won and all of those exciting things. And it would be great if you could talk a little bit about some of the techniques or the things that you learned from playing poker that you feel like you're applying now in other aspects of your life.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I think that one of the key lessons about failure that I got from poker came from an experience I had with Erik, where I tried to tell him a bad beat story. And for people who...
Yeah, I was going to ask, for people who don't know what a bad beat
people who don't play poker, a bad beat is when you get your money in as a favorite, you make the right decision, and then the cards go against you. And even though you're a favorite to win, and with a bad beat, you're an overwhelming favorite to win, you lose. Because one of the things that poker just hammers into your head is that certainty does not exist. Everything is probabilistic. I mean, you can get your money in as a 98% favorite, and that 2% is going to happen. And when it's happening to you, it feels like it happens a lot more than 2% of the time. It feels like it should wait. Hold on. How can that be 2%? I mean, I've actually had that happen where I've been a 98% favorite and then ended up losing a hand where, people just get lucky, and it teaches you what that feels like. And so in this particular case, it was one of my first trips to Las Vegas, and it hadn't been going well. Talk about failure. So Erik was teaching me how to play tournament poker. And for people who don't play poker, that means that your chips are worth nothing. You just pay a certain amount of money, you get chips, and their entire value is relative to other people in the tournament. And your goal is to get as many chips as possible. And at the end of the day, there'll be one person standing. And in any given tournament, about 12, 15% of the field will get paid and everyone else will go home with zero, or rather less than zero, because you're out whatever you paid to enter the tournament. So this is what I was playing, and I was going home with less than zero over and over and over again. And even though these were baby tournaments, $35, $40, $50 tournaments, they start adding up when you're in Vegas for multiple weeks and you're playing every day and you keep not cashing. And so finally, I was in this tournament where I was at the point where the next person out was going to get zero, and then the person after that was going to make money. It's called the bubble, which is a very important part in a tournament. And I had lots of chips. So I already knew that I was going to cash, and I was really excited about this because I was already planning how I was going to tell Erik about my first tournament cash and how proud he was going to be and how wonderful this was all going to be. And I got into a situation where I had an amazing hand. For people who play poker, I had top set on the flop with nothing else on the board, and no one could beat me. And we ended up getting all our chips in the middle. And I was so ecstatic. I was already counting my double up and counting, I was doing my little victory dance. Not literally, I would never do that. But in my head, I was victory dancing. And I mean, we know this started with a bad beat story. So the story ends with the person who was my opponent in the hand hitting his lucky card and knocking me out of the tournament. And so I went home with zero again. It was not the last time I was going to be the bubble girl, but it was the first time. And I don't like that feeling still to this day. It's not a great time to exit the tournament with zero. So I ran to find Erik and started telling him this story, and he didn't let me finish it. And your dad, he's a great listener. He's not somebody who usually interrupts a story. And so it was really shocking and upsetting to me where he told me to just be quiet, that he didn't want to hear it. And then he said something that has stayed with me ever since. I think about it most days, which is when you tell someone a bad beat story, it's like taking your trash and dumping it on their lawn. And it was such a powerful metaphor of the fact that, first of all, you're doing it wrong because you're taking up the trash and it's toxic and it's causing toxic things in your head. And then you're dumping that toxicity on someone else, which is also not very great, because you're focusing on the wrong thing. He asked me one very important question. He said, do you actually have a question about the hand, about how you played, about the decision you made? And that forced me to just stop and think and say, well, no, I guess not. I mean, I had top set. And he said, that's it. That's all that matters, right? Did you make the right decision? Did you think through it correctly? Were you thinking about the right things? I don't care how it ended. I don't care that you bubbled. I don't care if you won or lost. All I care about was, did you think correctly? And that was just such a powerful insight outside of poker for life, right? I don't care if you win or lose. I don't care what the outcome is. Did you do everything you could? Did you think through everything you could think through? Did you make the best decision you possibly could with the information that you had? And if the answer is yes, then great. The rest does not matter. And that was a conversation that I think it's the single conversation that I've taken the most from in my day-to-day life, because just asking yourself over and over, did I play my hand correctly when you're in a situation in life? Did I make the right decision, win or lose? It's a way to make sure that you don't dwell on bad outcomes, that you don't let yourself ruminate when things don't go well, that you don't take too much credit when they go great, because the other big sin of poker, obviously, is to say, oh, I'm a genius. I knew that card was coming. I knew that was going to happen. I'm so great because it all turned out okay, which is not always true. You might win with a horrible decision. That person, when I was a 98% favorite, who was a 2% favorite, so a huge, huge dog, probably thought that he was a genius. And he was not. He should not have done that.
Yeah.
So that's just such a powerful attitude. I think that's just the key to being emotionally resilient, to being able to get through a lot of bad situations in life, to just focus on the things that you can actually control, that are actually part of your decision process, because you can't control the cards, you can't control the outcome. And so why in the world waste your emotional or mental power thinking about that?
Yeah. One of the things that I can't control right now is the way that the sun is setting on my face. So I'm going to get the light guy in here for a second, and then we're going to while we fix this. But we talk to students. Thank you. We talk to students all the time about this this idea of like, you can only control what you can control, right? You can't control what other people are doing, and it really is such an important part of life and of poker and all of these things. But I'm getting so many questions in the chat for both of you. So do you mind if we field some of these and see what else comes our way?
No, don't mind at all.
Okay. So Erik, this first one is for you. How did you get into backgammon?
I got into backgammon because I lived on 101st Street in West End, and there was a place called Chess City on 100th Street in Broadway. And my brother and I were just walking around one day and ended up going up there just to see what was going on. And there was a backgammon game going, and it was kind of noisy. And so I didn't know anything about backgammon, and just went and watched it for a little while, and just got curious about the game. Ended up getting Paul McGrill's book, and then and read it, and then ended up bringing a backgammon board to school. And that was kind of how I financed my lunches in high school. Lunches and desserts. Baskin Robbins was the beneficiary of all those winnings. Yeah, and that was I just found that after reading the book, I was way ahead of anyone else that I was playing with. And then I just really enjoyed the game. And there was a backgammon club, actually just a games club that was on 75th and Broadway. Same owners as the first place, Chess City. And I would just go there after school and hang out and play for small stakes. And there were a lot of excellent players there. And that was kind of, I ended up being able to make a living at it, which was really, really fun for me because I love the game.
So this next one could be for both of you. So whoever hits the button first gets it. There is no question that poker takes serious brains, but how much does luck or the hand that you are dealt really play into it?
All right. I've got this.
Yeah, I was going to say, you talk a lot about this in your book.
All right, this has been your whole study, so you should be able to handle this.
So I mean, first of all, like there's no definitive answer. Like poker is 90% skill and 10% luck, right? Like that equation just does not exist. Just like it doesn't exist in life, because we live in an ambiguous and uncertain world. And it's life and poker are both games of probabilities and of incomplete information. And that's so incredibly important to remember. That's why poker is such a great metaphor for life. But what I tell people when they ask me this question, how much is skill and how much is chance, say, well, it depends. What's your time horizon, right? If you're looking at the short term, if you're looking at one hand, if you're looking at one game, even at one tournament, I think luck is a very present force. But over the long term, if you're looking at thousands of hands, hundreds of games, thousands of tournaments, then skill becomes the much greater force. And so it's all about the time horizon. So if Erik and I were to sit down and play one hand, either one of us could win, right? And that wouldn't tell us absolutely anything about our relative skill level. If we were to play one heads-up match, I might beat him. And that doesn't mean that I'm suddenly better than him. Despite what he says, he is light years better than I ever will be. And that's wonderful because I want to keep learning from him. But I might beat him in one heads-up match because I might get great cards and I might just get lucky and he might have not slept well. And I might, there might be all these other extraneous factors. If we play 10 times, it's probably going to start to be in his favor, but maybe not. We don't know. But if we play 100 times, if we play 1,000 times, I'm broke, right? I'm going broke. He is going to outplay me because he is the much more skilled player. And so the skill edge comes out over time. And over time, the skilled players are going to be the ones with all the money. And the ones who have less edge, who don't have the skill, are going to go broke if you actually play that simulation out. And so I think there's absolutely zero argument for me that poker is a game of skill. And that it's, at the end of the day, not a game of chance, not a game of luck. But in any given hand, in any given game, sure, luck is big. And that's true of life, right? Over the long term, skill is incredibly important. But in the short term, luck is a very powerful ally or foe. And unfortunately, poker is a game and life is not. And so sometimes in life, you can get so unlucky that there's no second chance. There's no long time. There's no long-term horizon. There's no second hand. And that sucks. And that's the reason why poker is a great teaching tool. But at the end of the day, it's never life, because I think luck in life is a much stronger force than it is in poker.
Dad, any thoughts on that one?
Well, I was going to mention that recently one of the a really excellent heads-up player played another excellent poker player, one of the top tournament poker players in the world, and they played 25,000 hands, and the odds were something like 6-1 in favor of the more skilled heads-up player, even though he was against another world-class player. So it definitely depends on the time horizon, and it depends on a relative skill level. If either one of these guys played somebody who was not that experienced, there would be no chance that they would win over 25,000 hands, not even 100-1.
For sure. And I would also say of that same match that the underdog player won his first match by a lot. And people were thinking, and was early on was ahead. And people thought, oh, we gave them the wrong odds. We underestimated him. They didn't. The odds were right. And he ended up getting crushed.
And that was about 1,000 hands or something.
Yep. But in the short term, he was ahead. And that's why it's so important to let the long term play out, because variance only evens out over the long term. Probability does not look normally distributed, right? You can look at it on your screen or on a chalkboard. Do you guys still use chalkboards or no? Is it now all whiteboards?
I know, Maria, you're supposed to be like the tech master that taught my dad everything, and then you're still talking about chalkboards. We're way past that. We got smart boards.
All right.
Whatever you have on your smart board. It's been a while. When I was in school, it was chalkboard. That's aging me a little, but even in college, it was chalkboard.
Right. For the kids out there who are watching this, it was a board of chalk and you had to write on it.
That doesn't exist anymore? That's shocking.
That's terrible. Yeah, no. I love chalkboards.
Yeah.
No.
So this is another panel.
No, you would love a smart board too,
but so pardon my aging use of chalkboard. When you look at your smartboard and you see this lovely little probability graph, right, with this wonderful bell curve or whatever it is, that's not what it looks like in life. That's not how probabilities are distributed. So if it's something that's 50-50, if it's a coin, right, and you flip it once, heads or tails, 50-50. But you could flip it 10 times in a row. It can be heads every single time. That doesn't mean something's wrong with the coin or something's wrong with the world. It means that 50-50 is 50-50 over millions of flips. It says nothing about the next 10. It says nothing about the next 50, the next 100. It's not going to be 50-50. It's only going to start approaching 50-50 with time. And I think that that's how you have to look at it. And that's why it's so important. This is, I think, a huge lesson that I've taken from poker that Erik just beat into my head from day one. It's so important to plan for the long term and to be smart. The reason I was playing $35 tournaments wasn't because I wanted to. I wanted to jump straight into the tournaments at Aria, which is where Erik was playing in his high rollers. I didn't want to play the high rollers, but they had, $100, $125 tournaments. I wanted to play those. And he said, no, that's way too much money. You have to think long term and actually play this out and have a bankroll, which is such an important concept for life and something we're not taught. I mean, we're not taught when we're kids to have a bankroll when we go into life. And we should be taught, think long term. No one knows what's going to happen tomorrow. No one knows what's going to happen in the next year.
Well, shameless gateway plug for 1 second is that we do spend a lot of time actually talking with the kids about this very concept of you don't just jump into something and start doing it, right? You have to think, what are the steps that I need to do in order to get me to whatever this goal is. And it really is.
Yeah, Ilya, there's.
Am I frozen?
No, we need to all, I think, mute ourselves for a second and unmute ourselves. There's a problem with the audio.
Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yeah, I don't hear it now.
Don't
Perfect.
hear it. Right in the middle of my gateway plug.
All right, gateway plug. Let's do it again.
Gateway plug from the top. So what I was saying is that this idea of really needing to plan and think ahead, and that you don't just jump right into the big games, you have to work yourself up to it, is a concept that we talk about all the time with kids. And I think it's a skill though. You have to learn this idea, and it takes practice. And clearly, you spent a lot of time working on that and working on it with my dad. But one of the things, Maria, that I was just thinking about that I think people find really fascinating is not just poker itself, but the poker community at large. And I'm wondering if you can speak at all to your experience as a woman in the poker community and what that was like for you.
Sure. Just as kind of a preface for people who aren't familiar with the poker world, in any given kind of tournament or field, it's usually 97 to 98% male. And the world of professional poker, that's the breakdown. And you should see tournament directors, if they have 5% females in a field, they're fist pumping. They're saying, yes, look at this great female turnout. And I just want to tell them, hey guys, it's 5%. That's not a lot. We've still got a long way to go. So I've worked in male dominated industries in the past, but this is very different. And so it is, I mean, especially at the beginning, it was difficult because you do experience a world where I don't think there are more jerks than there are in other places. There are jerks everywhere in life, but they're just not used to kind of taking into account that there's a woman at the table, and they don't like to. It's historically been kind of this boys club where they can drink and have fun and do and say whatever they want, and they don't want to watch themselves. They don't want to watch their tongue or watch their behavior. And so at the beginning, I definitely encountered some iffy situations, but I will say that as I progressed, kind of the higher up you go to people who take poker seriously and for whom this is a profession, as opposed to just, oh, I'm out in Vegas, let's go play some cards and get drunk. Once you get higher up, it became quite different. And from the very beginning, I think one of the greatest gifts that I got from being associated with Erik, which is one of the reasons why I think mentors are important, is to see what's possible, right? To see what's out there, to see that there's this community of absolutely incredible people in the poker world. I mean, some of the smartest, most brilliant people I have ever met and I've been in some pretty brilliant places, are in the poker world. I mean, these are people, including Erik, who could do anything and be anything in their life, and they've chosen to play this game, and they've chosen to do this. And it's not because, oh, this is the only thing I can do. It's because I love this and I'm passionate about it, and I think that I can bring joy to people by doing this, which I think they do. But they are, I've met some of just the most supportive, kindest people there. And that helped me get through kind of some of the other times when it wasn't as good. And it did take, there was a learning curve, because at the beginning, I definitely, sexism is alive and well everywhere, not just in poker. And the first thing, though, that people notice about me in poker is that I'm female, because it's the most salient thing at a poker table. If the world is 98% male, what stands out about me? Well, I'm not. I'm obviously female. And so that's kind of the thing that people notice about me. I mean, everyone notices things about other people, right? I'm biased. There are certain types of people, they sit down at the table and I make assumptions based on how they look. But people would make assumptions based on my gender. And at the beginning, I definitely let myself be bullied and let myself be taken advantage of. And so at the beginning, it held me back. But at the end of the day, it was such a powerful learning experience, because it forced me to confront the fact that I had internalized a lot of these gender stereotypes that society kind of rams down your throat. Women should be nice. We should avoid confrontation. We shouldn't be too aggressive if we want to get ahead, and yada, yada, yada. And we're sold that message from day one. And that's BS. And you learn how much of BS that is when you start playing poker, and you realize that if you internalize that message, you're going to lose all your money, because people are going to take advantage of you ruthlessly. And you know what? They're welcome to my money, because I'm making mistakes and I'm actually not playing well. I'm letting them take advantage of me. So they're not doing anything wrong. I am. And once I realized that, I actually think that my gender became a huge advantage, because people would play incorrectly against me, because they would make assumptions based on the fact that I was female. And once I realized that, I could exploit it, and I could counter those assumptions. I could play differently, and I could start taking all of their money. And the thing that I think is the most wonderful about this is when you talk to really high level players, they will say, everything you're saying is great about lower stakes player, but it doesn't apply to us. Well, we actually have data on some of those high stakes players from online poker. And it turns out it does apply to them. They just don't realize it. So it's this big blind spot where they don't actually think that they play any differently against a female, but they do. So they think that they're being game theory optimal or GTO, but really they still are factoring in the fact that I'm female on a subconscious level. The fact that I'm aware of that, I think, is actually a really, really huge advantage. And the fact that they're not, and that they refuse to be aware of it. Not everyone. I think that Erik would be very aware of things like that, because he's the one who taught me that he could never teach me how to play any given hand, because he's not me. There was a thing that he said to me multiple times that was really frustrating, but I think was very important. When I would ask him, how do I play this hand? He would say, well, it depends, because, I mean, it depends was the answer to everything. but he would say, I'm not you and you're not me. And when you're sitting at the table, people see something very different than when I'm sitting at the table. And sometimes I can get away with things that you can't get away with, but sometimes you can get away with things that I can't get away with. It's not interchangeable. That's the thing that computers and algorithms and, all of these solvers and programs don't understand. You can't just put one player in for another when you're sitting at a live game with live people. Everyone is different, and everyone makes assumptions about people, and Erik can get away with things I can't get away with, and I can get away with things he can't get away with, even against the best players in the world.
So interesting to think about, in considering how bias impacts decision-making and things like that. I'm looking at the clock, and time flies when you're having fun and chatting with some great people. So I have a few more questions that I want to make sure that we get to. And the first is for you, Dad. What do you think is the secret to your success? Other than your children keeping you very young.
Yeah, I would say definitely that having something to earn for it, being I would say it's mostly in poker. It's an open-mindedness that you have to really accept that you don't know very much very often, and you're constantly looking at information and trying to filter it and apply it. And so I would say it definitely has to do. Yeah, I mean, a natural curiosity I think is helpful. Just to be, just to be, you know, to know that you really don't have very many answers. And so you're just kind of going to be on the receiving end of whatever questions you have. You know, you're just kind of out there trying to trying to gather whatever information as open-mindedly as possible.
Yeah, that's great advice. Just things can come your way, and you have to. It's a bad poker pun, but you have to deal with the hand that you're dealt.
That's true.
So, Maria, what do you think is one life skill that is critical to success in life and poker? So similar to the question that I just asked him.
Well, I would actually, so to focus on something a little bit different, I would focus on kind of the necessity of being in touch with yourself and who you are and what your mind and body are telling you at all times. Kind of the necessity for mindfulness and mindful presence, because you have to control your emotions. And in order to control your emotions, you have to recognize your emotions. You have to know what causes your emotions. There's a degree of introspection that's required in success in both poker and life that you can't attain if you never spend time with yourself. So many people spend so much time trying to figure out, what are your tells and what's wrong with you and kind of what's going on there. And they forget to ask those questions about themselves, just to sit down and say, okay, what makes me tick? What makes me emotional? What makes me happy? What makes me sad? What am I hoping to achieve? What makes me angry? And to learn to recognize those things when they happen in you. I mean, poker actually put me, and I'm someone, to interrupt myself, I'm someone who has had a meditation practice long before I started playing poker, and who's been into mindfulness and yoga and everything for over a decade. And poker actually put me in touch with me in a much deeper way, because I had to learn to be so present that I would figure out, wait, okay, I'm not rational anymore. I am now angry because of this, or I'm upset because of this, or I'm trying to prove this to myself or to Erik. Those are never good things, because those are things that take you out of the moment, take you out of the decision, make you put different things in the calculus than you really should be putting in. And I think for success in life, just knowing yourself so that you can manage your emotions, so that you can actually kind of have self-control and learn to take emotions out of your decision process. Not learn not to feel emotions. You're feeling emotions all the time, and that's great. That's what makes us human. But to learn to recognize them and to kind of take them out of the decision when they're not actually germane, I think that's a crucial skill.
Yeah, the reflective piece is huge. Just really taking the time to sit with it and process and think about the decisions that you've made. So the final set of questions, I guess, in the spirit of the poker tournament that is following this talk, what advice, this is for both of you, would you give to someone that is looking to learn about poker or start playing for the first time? Dad, I'll toss this one to you.
Okay. There's more information available now than there has ever been. If you want to learn, if you want to spend the time, many of the best players in the world are online giving lessons. There, you can go to a website called Run It Once that has really elite players. There are plenty of books and articles and YouTubes that people can access for free. It's unbelievable the amount of information that's out there now. Up until just probably a few years ago, you really had very, very little information. There were a few books and most people didn't even read them. But now the game has changed a lot, and people really do use a lot of tools like computers and poker lessons online.
Yeah. I'm gonna add two things. One, there are 52 cards in a deck. Important piece of information to bring this full circle. Two, I actually was thinking about, it's really funny. When I think about the advice that Erik gave me at the beginning, my memory is completely wrong. So before I kind of went through, thankfully, because I'm a journalist, I take lots of notes and I have recordings so I can actually recapture what was going on at the moment. But for some reason, I had this certainty before I started going through what had actually happened early on, that Erik had told me that, you can't go wrong if you play it safe, and if you start off being very solid. And he'd actually told me the exact opposite. He was saying, get out there and just splash around a little bit so that you learn what different situations feel like, so that you learn what taking risk feels like, but do it at acceptable stakes, right? To do it for pennies, do it at low levels so that but do it for real money, not for fake money, so that you actually feel it, but that it's, $1. It's not actually a lot, but splash around and take risks and learn by doing. You will never learn if you're being conservative, because you're not going to play enough. You're not going to get into enough situations. You're not going to have to figure it out on your own. And I think I did not remember that he told me that until I actually went back. And my memory was the opposite, because my instinct is the opposite. I want to be more conservative, right? I don't want to take risk. It scares me. And so that is actually such great advice for life and for learning poker, that start out by actually getting out there and splashing around and trying it out and having fun and doing by learning, figuring out what it feels like. You can read all of the books in the world and watch all of the YouTube videos and go to Run It Once, and you should. It's a wonderful site. And neither Erik or I are affiliated with it. We're just
a lot of plugging happening here.
I know. I just realized that. But there's so many great things, but you're not going to absorb it unless you go and splash around and actually put it into play and actually learn to think through things when they're happening. Because one of the most powerful lessons is that you can't learn in a vacuum. You can't just learn from looking at the theory. You have to, it's so different when you're actually doing it. And I think that's so important, not just in poker, but it's important in poker.
Yeah. I have to say, this entire week of the speaker series has been, every day I leave feeling so inspired by the things that people are saying, and tonight is no different. I am so appreciative of the two of you taking the time to speak with us and be part of the Gateway community. Everything that you've said has been so valuable. I can't, speaking of plugging content here, I obviously cannot leave without telling every single person on this call that if you have not already, you have to rush to the local bookstore or peruse Amazon and purchase The Biggest Bluff. It is a great read. I know that I'm a little biased, but I did laugh. I laughed out loud. I loved it. I learned so much. And with that, thank you, Erik. Thank you, Maria. We'll see you in a few at the virtual poker table.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank
that was
you.
fun.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.